Marcus always believed in keeping life simple. He lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood with his small family, his wife, Jasmine, and their 8-year-old daughter, Mia. The kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, everyone mowed their lawns neatly on weekends, and where the biggest drama was usually a lost package or a barking dog. Marcus liked it that way. Routine gave him peace. Work, home, family, weekend barbecues, it was all he needed. But living under a homeowner's association came with rules. Rules that sometimes felt petty, controlling, or unnecessary. And then there was Karen. Marcus hated the way her name caused a ripple of tension through the neighborhood. Karen was in her mid-50s, always dressed in bright, slightly too formal clothes with a sharp gaze that seemed to sweep over everyone like she was judging their very existence. To Karen, the HOA wasn't just a set of guidelines, it was a weapon, and she wielded it with precision. Marcus had met Karen a few times over the years, always polite, always careful. But polite didn't matter to Karen. She would patrol the streets, write reports on neighbors' small violations, and often deliver lectures that felt more like threats. She had a reputation for controlling everyone's space, even the tiniest things. What color your mailbox was, whether your grass was exactly the right height, or if your car was parked a foot too close to the curb. Marcus thought he could avoid keep his head down, follow the rules, and everything would be fine. He even prided himself on being a good neighbor. But Friday morning, Marcus learned that Karen didn't care about boundaries at all. He stepped out of his front door, coffee cup in hand, ready to leave for work, and froze. The warm morning sunlight hit something impossible. His garage was wide open. His heart sank as he realized what it meant. Inside, parked in the very center of the space that was supposed to be his private sanctuary, was Karen's black SUV. Marcus blinked. He rubbed his eyes, hoping it was a trick of the light, but no. The car was real. Karen had parked in his garage, without asking, without warning, without any sense of shame. He felt a rush of emotions all at once: shock, anger, frustration, and a deep, almost physical ache of violation. This wasn't just a parking spot. That garage held memories. His first bike as a child, the shelves where he kept tools he had spent years collecting, a little workbench he had built with Mia for their weekend projects. That space had been his alone. A small sanctuary in a world that often demanded more than he could give. And now it wasn't his anymore. Marcus swallowed hard and walked toward Karen's front door, trying to calm himself. His mind raced with what to say, how to act, how to keep his cool without exploding. When Karen answered, she looked at him with a faint, almost smug smile. "Oh, Marcus, I just needed a spot for a few hours. It's no big deal," she said, waving him off casually. "Don't worry about it." "No big deal?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "This is my garage, my stuff is in there, you can't just park here." Karen shrugged. "Relax, it's only for today, you're overreacting." Overreacting. That word hit Marcus like a slap. How dare she diminish his feelings? How dare she take what was his and make him feel like he was being unreasonable for caring about his own space? He looked at her, really looked at her, and something inside him stirred. A quiet, simmering realization that he couldn't just let this go. For months, for years, he had stayed silent, followed rules, and avoided conflict. But this crossed a line. She hadn't just disrespected him. She had disrespected his home, his family, his life. And in that moment, Marcus felt something awaken inside him. Not anger exactly. Not yet. It was something quieter, something sharper, a determination. He would respond, but not the way Karen expected. He would take back his space, reclaim his peace, and she would have no power over him. Not through yelling, not through complaints, not through intimidation. He would do it his way. As he walked back to his car, his mind spun with possibilities. He didn't know what he would do yet, but he knew one thing. Things were about to change. Marcus spent the next few minutes pacing in his driveway, trying to calm his racing thoughts. His mind was a whirlwind of frustration and disbelief. Karen had crossed a line and he couldn't let it slide. but he also didn't want to act rashly. Every story he had heard about her ended in conflict, gossip, and embarrassment. Yet, as he sipped his now cold coffee, he realized that staying silent would feel worse. Finally, he squared his shoulders and walked back to her front door. Each step felt heavier than the last. His heart thumped painfully against his chest, a mixture of anger and fear. He wasn't someone who liked confrontation, but he also wasn't someone who let people walk over him. Today, he would make that clear. He knocked firmly. The door swung open, and there she was, standing with her hands on her hips, a faint smirk playing on her lips. She looked at him like a cat watching a mouse, waiting to see if he would back down. "Marcus," she said, her tone sweet but sharp. What a surprise. He took a deep breath. "Karen, you need to move your car. That's my garage." "Oh, that?" she said, glancing past him as if it were nothing. "I just needed a spot for a few hours. Don't worry, it won't be a problem." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Not a problem. Not a problem. His garage was his sanctuary. His tools, his shelves, his memories, they were all in there. This wasn't just a car in a space. This was a violation of his life. "I don't care if it's for a few hours," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You can't just park in my garage without asking. That's not okay." Karen rolled her eyes. "Marcus, seriously? You're overreacting. It's just a car. Just move on." Her words felt like a punch to the stomach. Overreacting? After everything? After years of him being polite, quiet, and careful not to upset her? The thought made a cold fire ignite inside him. "I'm not overreacting," Marcus said, taking a small step closer. "This is my home, my space, and you just walked in and used it like it didn't matter." Karen tilted her head, her smirk now more like a challenge. "Marcus, you take life too seriously. You should relax. I didn't think this would bother you so much." It bothered him more than anything ever had. Not because of the car, not because of the space, but because Karen had ignored his boundaries. She assumed that she could control his life, his property, and his peace. And for once, Marcus realized he didn't have to let her. He looked her straight in the eye, steady and firm. "Karen, this isn't about relaxing. It's about respect. And right now, I'm not feeling any." For a moment, Karen seemed taken aback. She blinked, unsure, as if she hadn't expected him to speak so firmly. Marcus felt a small surge of satisfaction but didn't let it soften him. He needed to act, not just talk. "Look," he continued, lowering his voice. "I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to call the HOA. I just want you to understand that this isn't acceptable. You need to move your car." Karen huffed. "Fine, I'll move it, and eventually." Eventually. That word made Marcus see red. He realized that talking, reasoning, begging, none of it would work with her. She would never respect his time or space if he gave in. He needed a plan. As he turned and walked back to his driveway, he felt a mix of emotions. Anger, yes, but also clarity. Karen wasn't just a difficult neighbor. She was the kind of person who believed she had the right to impose her will, and Marcus now understood that no polite words would stop her. He needed a response that was calm, quiet, and completely out of her control. Something that would make her feel the consequences of her actions without him losing his peace or dignity. And in that moment, as he stared at his garage with Karen's SUV mocking him from inside, Marcus made a decision. He would reclaim his space. But not with anger, not with shouting. He would do it his way, a way that she could never manipulate or argue against. A plan formed in his mind, steady and clear, and a small smile crept across his face. For the first time that morning, Marcus felt a sense of empowerment he hadn't felt in years. Today, things would change. Marcus sat in his living room that evening, staring at the ceiling. The day had been tense, and his chest still felt tight, from the confrontation with Karen. He had tried to reason, to stay calm, and yet nothing had worked. Karen had dismissed him, treated his space like it didn't matter, and walked away as if he was the one in the wrong. For a long moment, Marcus considered calling the HOA or reporting her. That would have been the logical step, he thought. But every fiber of him recoiled at the idea. The HOA was slow, bureaucratic, and honestly, it probably wouldn't teach her a lesson. No, he needed something different. Something that would make her feel the way he felt that morning, without him having to yell, argue, or lose his calm. He thought about his garage, the SUV parked boldly in the middle, and a plan slowly began to form. It wasn't mean or vengeful. It was strategic, quiet, controlled. Perfect. Marcus realized the beauty of the plan lay in its simplicity. He would reclaim his garage, his sanctuary, in a way that Karen could not ignore. He would lock the garage, trap her SUV inside, and remove himself from the situation entirely. 10 days. That was how long he would go on a small vacation, leaving her to deal with the inconvenience she had caused him. It would be a quiet reminder that actions have consequences, not loud, not angry, just effective. He imagined the look on her face when she returned from errands, unable to move her car. The thought made a small, victorious smile creep onto his lips. But Marcus didn't want this to feel like revenge. He wanted it to feel like peace. The garage wasn't just a place for confrontation. It was a sanctuary he had temporarily reclaimed, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Over the next few hours, Marcus quietly organized the plan. He would pack a small bag for a 10-day trip, just enough to escape the stress, spend time with his kids, and recharge. Jasmine was surprised when he suggested a short getaway. "Are you sure?" she asked, sensing his tension. Marcus nodded, keeping his voice calm. "I need a break from all the stress, and Mia deserves a little adventure." Meanwhile, he thought about Karen. She had always acted like she had control over everyone's lives, dictating rules and boundaries she could bend at will. But Marcus realized something vital. Her power only existed if he let it. By taking back his peace and acting deliberately, he could finally put the control back in his own hands. He spent the evening carefully checking everything in the garage. He made sure nothing could be damaged and that her SUV would be completely safe while he was gone. Marcus was not reckless. He was thoughtful, calculated, and precise. The last thing he wanted was chaos. He wanted quiet, calm, and an undeniable lesson in boundaries. As night fell, Marcus looked at his family, sleeping peacefully, and felt a deep sense of resolve. Tomorrow morning he would put the plan into action. He would lock the garage, leave the note, and drive away for 10 days, giving Karen exactly what she had unknowingly demanded: patience, waiting, and the reality that her control wasn't limitless. Marcus also felt something else: excitement. This wasn't just about a car or a garage anymore. This was about reclaiming dignity, teaching subtle accountability, and embracing the freedom to protect his space. For years he had tiptoed around neighbors, avoided conflict, and swallowed frustration. Not anymore. That night, as he drifted to sleep, Marcus felt lighter than he had in weeks. Tomorrow the game would begin, but it wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about self-respect, calm strategy, and quiet triumph. And for the first time in a long time, he truly felt in control of his own life again. Marcus didn't know exactly how Karen would react, but that didn't matter. He had chosen his path, and he would walk it with clarity, calm, and courage. And somehow, deep down, he knew the next 10 days would change more than just her perspective. They would change his too. The next morning, Marcus woke early, feeling a mix of excitement and nervous energy. The air was crisp and sunlight poured through the windows, casting a warm glow on his living room. He moved deliberately, checking his bag, making sure everything for the short 10-day vacation was ready. Clothes, snacks for Mia, a few books, simple things, but enough to make this feel like a true escape. Marcus glanced at the garage one last time. Karen's black SUV sat in the center, bold and defiant, almost like it knew it didn't belong there. He felt a small surge of satisfaction. The garage was his domain, and soon it would be properly reclaimed, even if only temporarily. He walked outside and examined the garage door, testing the lock, making sure it would secure the vehicle without causing damage. Safety was important. This wasn't about destruction or revenge. It was about sending a quiet message, about boundaries and respect. Marcus's hands were steady, calm. His mind was focused. With everything in place, he took a deep breath and locked the garage. The click of the lock felt louder than it should, resonating like a punctuation mark on a long chapter of stress and frustration. Then he placed a simple note on Karen's windshield. "Karen, I'll be out of town for 10 days. Your car will be safe in my garage. See you when I return." Marcus stepped back and looked at it, satisfied. No anger, no threats, just calm, clear boundaries. He wanted her to understand that he wasn't overreacting, that he wasn't unreasonable. He was standing up for himself in a way that demanded respect. Jasmine and Mia appeared in the driveway, sensing the tension in Marcus's posture. "Are you sure about this?" Jasmine asked softly, worry in her eyes. Marcus nodded. "It's not about being mean. It's about reclaiming our peace, our space. It's time we take a break from all this stress." Mia smiled, excited. "Can we really go on an adventure, Daddy?" Marcus chuckled and ruffled her hair. "Yes, baby. 10 days of fun, just us." As they drove away, Marcus felt an unexpected lightness in his chest. The neighborhood receded behind him, the familiar streets, the manicured lawns, and the gaze of neighbors, replaced by open roads and freedom. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't living under Karen's control. Back home, Karen returned from her morning errands unaware of Marcus's plan. Her smile faded as she saw the garage locked. She tried the handle, jiggled the doors, and then finally noticed the note on her windshield. Her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in frustration. "Marcus!" she shouted, though no one could hear her beyond the street. She called neighbors, she fumed, and she tried everything in her power to move her SUV. But the garage remained locked, quiet, and completely untouchable. Marcus, meanwhile, drove further from the neighborhood, a small grin tugging at his lips. He didn't feel guilty or triumphant, just calm, peaceful, and free. He spent the day driving, stopping at scenic spots, and letting the tension of the past week melt away. Every mile put him further from Karen's control, and every smile from Mia reminded him why this plan mattered. That evening, Marcus sat by a campfire in a small cabin they rented for the night. The fire crackled, and the stars shone bright above. He listened to Mia laugh as she roasted marshmallows, and Jasmine leaned against him, her hand warm in his. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt that he was exactly where he needed to be. It wasn't just a vacation. It was a statement, a reclaiming of his life and his boundaries. Karen's SUV might be stuck in the garage, but Marcus's spirit was unchained. The peace he had sought for months was finally his, and it was a feeling he would carry with him long after the 10 days were over. And somewhere in the neighborhood, Karen was learning the hard way that control only exists when you allow it. Marcus smiled quietly, sipping his coffee by the fire. This was his moment, not hers, and he intended to savor it fully. The first morning of their vacation, Marcus woke to the sound of birds chirping and the soft rustle of leaves outside the cabin window. The tension from the past week already felt like a distant memory. Jasmine stretched and smiled at him, and Mia bounced out of bed, her excitement impossible to contain. For the first time in months, Marcus felt a lightness in his chest that he hadn't realized he was missing. They spent the morning hiking through a nearby forest. Marcus watched Mia run ahead, her laughter echoing through the trees. He felt a sense of pride and relief. For so long, life had been filled with small battles, emails with the HOA, comments from Karen, and the constant worry of keeping everyone happy. Now for 10 days, none of that mattered. Here, in the quiet of nature, Marcus could breathe. Back in the neighborhood, Karen's frustration reached a peak she hadn't anticipated. She had tried calling Marcus, but he hadn't picked up. She complained to neighbors, called the HOA, and even considered towing services, but every attempt failed. The SUV remained locked in his garage, a silent reminder that her control wasn't limitless. Meanwhile, Marcus and his family explored small towns along winding roads, stopping at local diners, exploring lakes, and taking countless pictures. Marcus felt a sense of freedom he hadn't known he was craving. Each day brought new adventures, laughter, and moments that reminded him why boundaries mattered, not as punishments but as protection for his peace and sanity. One afternoon, they rented kayaks and paddled across a calm lake. Marcus watched, the sunlight dance on the water as Mia squealed when a fish jumped near her paddle. He realized he hadn't felt this relaxed in years. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about what Karen thought, what the HOA demanded, or how neighbors would judge him. He was present, fully immersed in the moment, and it felt amazing. At night around the campfire, Marcus reflected on the past week. Karen had always seemed so powerful in the neighborhood, dictating rules and invading space with ease. But in these 10 days, Marcus had learned a vital lesson. Real power wasn't about control, it was about peace. By taking a step back, acting calmly and asserting boundaries without anger, he had regained something far more valuable than arguments or approval. Jasmine noticed his calmness and smiled. "You look lighter," she said. Marcus nodded, feeling the truth in her observation. He realized that standing up for himself hadn't just been about the garage or Karen, it had been about his own dignity, his ability to protect his family, and his mind from unnecessary stress. Meanwhile, in the neighborhood, the story of Karen's stuck SUV became a quiet spectacle. Neighbors whispered, some chuckled privately, and a few began to notice that Karen's assertive control wasn't as absolute as she liked to believe. The realization that one person could quietly resist her behavior spread, creating small ripples Marcus hadn't expected, but secretly enjoyed. As the vacation continued, Marcus felt an inner clarity he hadn't known before. The act of locking the garage and stepping away had done more than inconvenience Karen. It had freed him from fear of confrontation, from endless tension, and from the constant need to appease someone who refused to respect boundaries. By the 8th day, Marcus knew he was returning to a changed perspective. Karen would still be Karen, and the neighborhood still held its rules and small dramas, but he no longer felt trapped by them. He had learned the power of quiet action, patience, and reclaiming personal space without shouting or losing control. On the 10th morning, as they packed their car to return home, Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of stress lift completely. He looked at his family, smiling and laughing, and realized something simple but profound. Sometimes, stepping away, letting go, and taking control in your own way is the truest form of strength. Karen's SUV would still be in his garage, but Marcus felt no anger, no triumph, only calm. And that calm, quiet, unshakable, and fully earned, was more satisfying than any confrontation could have been. The drive back to their neighborhood felt different for Marcus. The air was lighter, the roads more familiar yet somehow less oppressive. 10 days of escape had given him more than just time away. It had given him clarity, confidence, and a deep sense of peace. As he approached the familiar streets lined with neat lawns and identical mailboxes, he felt ready to return, ready to face Karen, ready to reclaim not just his garage, but his dignity. Mia sat in the back seat, excitedly pointing out houses as if seeing them for the first time. Jasmine glanced at Marcus and gave him a reassuring smile. "You look calm," she said quietly. "Stronger even." Marcus nodded. "I feel calm. I feel ready." When they pulled into the driveway, Marcus's heart thumped a little faster. The garage loomed ahead, Karen's black SUV still locked inside as if daring him to act. He parked his car and stepped out, feeling the weight of anticipation settle over him. The neighborhood seemed to notice, quiet and expectant, as if everyone could sense the resolution that was about to unfold. Karen was already outside. She had been watching the driveway, fuming, pacing, muttering to herself as she tried to imagine how Marcus would react. When she saw him approach, her face twisted into a mixture of shock and fury. "How dare you!" she shouted, her voice sharp and loud enough to carry down the street. Marcus stopped a few feet away, hands relaxed at his sides. He didn't shout, he didn't fume. He simply smiled calmly and said, "Hey, Karen, your car is safe, everything is fine, I've been away and now I'm back." Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She had prepared herself for anger, for excuses, for confrontation, but not this. Not calm, not quiet confidence. She sputtered, trying to find words, but Marcus remained steady, composed, unshaken by her storm of frustration. This isn't acceptable," she finally yelled, gesturing wildly toward the locked garage. "You can't just—" "I understand your frustration," Marcus interrupted gently. "I locked the garage because you parked without asking. That space is private. I wanted to make sure my family's peace was respected. It's not about anger. It's about boundaries." Karen's eyes narrowed, confusion and disbelief fighting against her pride. Marcus noticed the small cracks in her usual armor, the realization that her control over everyone wasn't absolute. She couldn't manipulate him, couldn't intimidate him, couldn't force compliance this time. Marcus continued, his voice calm but firm. "I didn't do this to punish you. I did it to protect our space. You now know how it feels when someone doesn't respect your property, that's all." Karen was silent, her cheeks flushed. Her fury had no voice, her usual arguments powerless against Marcus's composed words. Neighbors watched from across the street, some curious, some quietly amused, but none interfering. Marcus's calm, collected presence made the situation clear. He had won without raising his voice, without arguing, without aggression. He unlocked the garage, handed her the keys, and smiled once more. "Your SUV is safe. I hope this helps you understand the importance of respecting other people's space." Karen could only gape. Marcus turned and walked back to his car, joined by Jasmine and Mia, feeling a quiet satisfaction that was different from triumph. It was deeper, more personal. It was peace. As they drove away from the confrontation, Marcus realized something profound. Power doesn't come from anger, shouting, or intimidation. True power comes from calm, control, and protecting what matters most, your own peace and dignity. Karen never parked in his garage again. Their interactions remained polite but distant, and Marcus never felt fear or frustration about her again. For the first time, he understood the true meaning of boundaries, not as rules for others, but as armor for your own life. And as Marcus pulled into his driveway, smiling at Mia and Jasmine, he felt a satisfaction that went beyond victory. He had reclaimed his space, his freedom, and his calm. And that peace, quiet, unshakable, and fully earned, was more powerful than any argument could ever be. After the confrontation, life slowly returned to a new kind of normal for Marcus. The garage was once again his, the SUV gone, and Karen no longer dared to cross his boundaries. But the true change was inside him. He realized that this experience wasn't just about a car or a stubborn neighbor. It was about reclaiming his peace, his voice, and his right to protect his home. Marcus often thought back to those 10 days of vacation, to the quiet moments by the lake, the laughter of his daughter as she paddled in the sunlight, the warmth of Jasmine's hand in his own. Those days had been more than a simple escape, they had been a revelation. He had learned something vital. Life's battles are not always won by yelling, complaining, or forcing others to obey. Sometimes the most powerful victories are quiet, deliberate, and deeply personal. Neighbors noticed the subtle change in Marcus too. He walked with a newfound confidence, no longer weighed down by the fear of confrontation or the need to appease Karen's overbearing personality. Some whispered about what had happened, curious and amazed, but Marcus didn't care. The lesson was his, and it didn't need approval from anyone else. Karen, on the other hand, had learned her own lesson, though perhaps not the one she expected. Her sense of control had been challenged, her usual tactics ineffective. For once, she faced the reality that her power had limits, that her authority could be quietly resisted without drama or escalation. Marcus didn't gloat, but the knowledge that she had experienced a small taste of her own medicine brought a subtle satisfaction, a quiet validation of his choice to act calmly and thoughtfully. For Marcus, the garage had become more than just a space for cars and tools. It had become a symbol of strength, patience, and boundaries. Every time he opened the door, he remembered the careful steps he had taken, the calm decision to protect his peace, and the 10 days that had reminded him of what truly mattered: family, freedom, and dignity. One evening, as Marcus sat on the porch with Jasmine and Mia, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, he reflected on the entire experience. "You know," he said softly, "it wasn't about her car. It was about feeling safe in our home, about teaching boundaries without losing ourselves in anger." Jasmine smiled, squeezing his hand. "You handled it so well, calm, thoughtful, and still strong." Mia nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, you didn't even yell, Daddy." Marcus chuckled, feeling a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in years. That night, Marcus went to bed feeling a deep sense of peace. The garage, the neighborhood, the small dramas, they no longer held power over him. He had learned to protect his life and his family with quiet confidence, with thoughtful action, and with patience. He realized that true strength isn't loud or aggressive, it's calm, deliberate, and unwavering. Over the following weeks, the neighborhood slowly settled back into routine. Karen continued her patrols, but Marcus was no longer intimidated or stressed. He greeted her politely, never angry, never provoked. And she, recognizing that her usual tactics no longer worked, began to back off. Marcus often shared the story with friends and family, not to boast, but to teach a lesson. That boundaries are essential, that peace is worth defending, and that sometimes the quietest actions speak the loudest. He wanted people to know that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean shouting. It can mean acting wisely, calmly, and decisively. And in the end, Marcus realized that the greatest victory wasn't the locked garage or the 10-day vacation. It was the reclaiming of his own life. The laughter of his daughter, the smiles of his wife, and the freedom to live without constant worry had become his true triumph. The garage remained a simple space, but in Marcus's mind it was sacred, a symbol of dignity, courage, and quiet. Strength. Every time he opened it, he felt the lasting reminder of one small act that changed everything. And Marcus knew, with absolute certainty, that he had finally learned the most important lesson of all. True power comes not from control, but from peace.